Well, hello again, my friends. It's great to be able to come to you in this way in the middle of Holy Week, in the middle of quarantine, lockdown, stay at home, all of that. I hope that you're finding some time to be with your family, to find some rest, and also just to spend some time with God. That's actually part of the reason that we are putting these short devotionals together to allow you that kind of a time. And so I hope that you're able to do that. Well, it's Wednesday, and I'd like to share with you today a story that is told in the book of Mark, where at the end of the story, Jesus says that this story will be told every time the gospel is shared, is proclaimed throughout the world. So in that way, it's a pretty important story. But before I get to that story, I want to share a little bit of my story, particularly my story with Sarah. This last December, Sarah and I celebrated 21 years of marriage together. But before that, we were not together, and I was doing my best to help Sarah see the light that she needed to be with me. And it's kind of an epic tale. 2.5 years I pursued Sarah, and I did everything I possibly could to get her to see that I was going to be the guy. I would drive to her house, and I would make sure her car was there before going back to my house and calling her. I would buy her things. I would put myself in places where I knew that she would be, in circles where I knew that she would be. And at some point, a friend of mine even said to me, "Mark, stop. You're like a little puppy dog. It's actually kind of pathetic," which maybe it was, But when you know what you want, when you're in love, it makes you do things that maybe you normally wouldn't or shouldn't, maybe. But I was thinking about that as I was reading this story for this afternoon, because the same, I think, should be said of Jesus' followers. When we understand who he is and what he has done for us, we are compelled to do things and behave in ways that normally maybe we wouldn't. But because of who Jesus is, we are. So I want to read to you this afternoon from Mark chapter 14, verses 1 through 11. Now the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away. The chief priests and teachers of the law were looking for some sly way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table at the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages, and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them any time you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money. So he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Now, can you imagine what that would have been like sitting there with Jesus when this happened? What would you have done if you were throwing a dinner party for some dignitary or somebody that you wanted to honor, and something like this happened? Can you imagine to say that moment was pregnant with whatever anybody was going to say, is to say something. And then finally, when the silence is broken, they begin to say things like, "Why would you do this? Why we could have sold that perfume and given the money that we made from that to the poor. And they begin to just rebuke her and tell her how awful this thing that she has done is. But Jesus comes to her defense. He says, "Stop it. Stop it. No, you're not seeing the point. You don't understand." And then he drops his own bomb into the middle of this. He says, "You don't understand. What she has done is prepared me for my own burial. She's preparing my body for burial." Oh my goodness, can you imagine what you would have thought had that happened, had that taken place? I mean, I'm sure that stopped everyone else up short. And I also wonder too, did the woman know exactly what she was doing in that? I mean, did she have some sort of feeling of impending doom? Did she know what was on up ahead, or was this, or maybe even was she understood him as a king and anointing him in the ways that priests would of kings in that day and age? Well, we'll never know that, but we do know this, that whatever her motivation, she was compelled to do it. This was who Jesus was to her, and she was compelled to do this extravagant act. Now, in the middle of this episode is sort of a sandwich in between what is going on outside, which is that the chief priests and the religious leaders are trying to find ways to kill Jesus. That's on the top half. And then on the bottom half, you have Judas Iscariot going out to do just that, to betray Jesus, to use him for his purposes, whatever those might be. Maybe he was trying to force Jesus' hand to be who he thought he should be. But in the middle, you have this beautiful episode of this woman doing this great extravagant act toward Jesus, and she is the one that does the right thing. And you notice that this is the only affection that is showed Jesus all throughout the events of Holy Week, except for the kiss of betrayal that Judas offers to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And all of this is taking place prior to Passover. There are thousands of pilgrims in Jerusalem getting ready to celebrate this Passover feast that is centered on the blood of a sacrificial lamb. They're celebrating the Exodus and how the Spirit of God passed over the homes of those who had smeared the sacrificial blood of this lamb over their homes so many years ago. So just think about that for a minute and consider your response to what would have happened there, but also maybe your response to others' acts of devotion. Have you ever been critical of another's response to Jesus? To others' response as they have given to the Lord in worship or in devotion without inhibition? Somebody maybe that quit their job and went and did missions just because that's what they felt they were called to do. Or another person who dances wildly and jumps up and down in praise of who God is. Or others who sing music that might lack polish but add a sort of integrity and a wholeness of spirit to worship. Or even those who give overtly. What has been your response to all of that? Your response to somebody that was simply compelled to do this because of who Jesus was and is to them. These, you might say, are extravagant responses of Jesus followers because of their understanding of who God is as an extravagant God. And so could it be that this episode, that this story was meant to say to us, this story about a woman who comes in with a white alabaster jar and breaks it and pours it over Jesus' head, could this story be saying to us, go ahead, break a vase, break a jar for heaven's sake, do something. Right? Could it be that this story is saying that this is not just only appropriate, but essential to who we are as followers of Jesus? That we should, in fact, break a vase, that we should respond proportionally to what God has done for us. I want you to think about it like this. On Sundays, week after week, when we are able to come to church, we file in here into our worship space as, in essence, white alabaster, beautiful white alabaster jars. Or in a case like we are now, where we're confined to our homes, we are beautiful white alabaster jars, kind of sort of painting the landscape, you might say, all throughout our neighborhoods, through the places that we go and find ourselves day after day. And we are contained, we're self-sufficient, we're encased, filled with this beautiful, wonderful, overwhelming fragrance, but emitting no aroma whatsoever. None. We're very careful to preserve what we have, our faith, the grace that we have been given, this Jesus that is locked up inside of us, and even taking notice and evaluating the vases that are other people as well. No doubt we come and we are who we are because of Jesus, because Jesus is inside of us, right? He is there. Jesus, this precious, exciting, life-giving Spirit, is there inside of us. But do we keep Jesus too much to ourselves? Is he too contained inside of us? And the air around us is just filled with nothing, with no aroma. But we are called, says Paul, to be the aroma of Christ. As Christians, we are called to be broken before the world and to fill it with sweetness and beauty. It's awkward, and it's scary to be broken. Absolutely, it's easier to keep up that cold alabaster front. But is that what we're called to as Christians? I think this is a question that is really a really good one to consider at this time in the middle of Holy Week, as we look ahead to Good Friday and what happens there, and to Easter and the events of that day. It's a very good thing to consider. And in fact, I'm going to challenge you to go back and reread this story, Mark chapter 14, verses 1 through 11, and read it and reread it and let it flow over you. And in fact, maybe you could say, let it read you, and begin to ask yourself the question, what does this story say about my response to God? Or what does this story say about my response to others' response towards God? And ask, too, what change might this story be calling you to? Because if the gospel calls us to anything, it's change, it's transformation in light of the cross and the empty tomb. Thanks again for tuning in here on this Wednesday of Holy Week. I hope that you are blessed, and again, that you are making time to really consider this story. We'll be coming back again on Thursday with another devotional, and I hope also you'll join us on Good Friday, 6:30, for our live stream service of the events of that day. Until then, I hope it's a great week. We'll see you again soon.